Why was Jamie Gillis everywhere in 1970s adult cinema? It's a question that sounds exaggerated, until you actually examine the era, film after film, year after year. Across studios, directors, and styles, the repetition becomes impossible to ignore. This wasn't coincidence, it wasn't luck, and it wasn't simply popularity. It was the result of a very specific historical moment, one that briefly allowed adult cinema to believe it could be something more than disposable entertainment. To understand why Jamie Gillis appeared so often, you first have to understand the world he entered. The early 1970s were a period of cultural upheaval in the United States. Trust in institutions was eroding, authority was questioned, and cinema reflected that uncertainty. Hollywood itself was changing. The old studio system had collapsed, and a new generation of filmmakers was embracing realism, discomfort, and ambiguity. Characters no longer needed to be likable, they needed to feel real. This shift influenced everything, including adult cinema. For a brief moment, adult films were not treated as throwaway products. They were screened in theaters, reviewed in mainstream publications, discussed alongside experimental and underground cinema. This period is often referred to as the Golden Age, not because of quality alone, but because of ambition. Studios wanted stories, dialogue, characters. And that required performers who could do more than simply appear on screen. The era produced recognizable figures. There was Harry Reams, whose notoriety made him a symbol of public controversy. There was John Holmes, whose exaggerated image came to represent excess and myth. And later, Ron Jeremy, who leaned into humor and self-awareness. Each of these figures represented a clear idea. But Jamie Gillis represented something less obvious and more useful. He represented realism. When Gillis entered the industry in the early 1970s, adult filmmaking was expanding rapidly. Demand was high, budgets were limited, and production schedules were tight. Despite its visibility, the industry was small. The same studios reused the same crews. The same directors worked with the same performers. Trust mattered more than image. If someone could follow direction, remember dialogue, and deliver consistent performances without creating delays, they were hired again and again. Jamie Gillis built that reputation early. He wasn't marketed as a fantasy figure. He wasn't framed as aspirational. He simply worked, frequently and reliably. That alone made him valuable. But what made him dominant was how closely his screen presence matched the cultural mood of the decade. Gillis did not project innocence. He did not project charm. He projected ambiguity. His presence felt grounded, sometimes uncomfortable, and unmistakably human. In an era obsessed with realism, that mattered. Filmmakers trying to emulate the tone of serious cinema needed performers who could hold a scene without spectacle. They needed faces that didn't distract from the atmosphere. Gillis provided that. As adult films experimented with longer runtimes and more dialogue, directors discovered something important. Jamie Gillis could carry scenes, not through charisma, but through tension. He didn't soften moments, he intensified them. This made him particularly useful in low-budget productions, where atmosphere had to be created through performance rather than technical polish. Over time, casting him became a shortcut. If a director wanted a certain tone, serious, gritty, confrontational, Gillis delivered it reliably. That reliability created repetition, and repetition created ubiquity. Audiences began to associate his face with a specific kind of film. Not fantasy, not escapism, but confrontation. This is why his presence feels different from his contemporaries. While others represented exaggerated ideals, Gillis represented discomfort. And the 1970s were deeply interested in discomfort. Mainstream cinema was doing the same thing. Anti-heroes replaced traditional protagonists. Films explored moral uncertainty and power dynamics without resolution. Adult cinema mirrored that shift, whether intentionally or not. Jamie Gillis fit that mirror perfectly. By the mid-1970s, his face had become symbolic, not because of promotion, but because of repetition. Casting him signaled seriousness, a certain ambition, and for a short time, ambition mattered. But cultural moments don't last. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the industry began to change again. Theatrical releases declined. Home video altered production priorities. Speed replaced storytelling. The demand for realism gave way to formula, and the very traits that made Gillis valuable, intensity, ambiguity, psychological weight, became less desirable. The industry no longer needed confrontation. It needed efficiency. As a result, figures closely tied to the earlier era slowly faded. There was no dramatic collapse, no defining scandal that marked an end. Just a quiet exit as the cultural moment passed. This is how many era-defining figures disappear, not through failure, but through misalignment with what comes next. Today, when historians look back at 1970s adult cinema, they don't see variety, they see patterns. And one of the most visible patterns is Jamie Gillis's presence. Film after film, year after year, not because he was the most famous, not because he was the most celebrated, but because he embodied the tone of that moment more completely than almost anyone else. His dominance was not accidental. It was structural. The industry needed realism. The era valued discomfort. And Jamie Gillis delivered both consistently. That is why he was everywhere. And that is why, decades later, his presence still defines how the 1970s are remembered. Not as fantasy, not as excess, but as a brief, ambitious moment when even the most unlikely corner of cinema believed it could reflect the world honestly. And for that moment, Jamie Gillis was unavoidable. And today, Jamie Gillis is remembered not as a star who burned out, but as a figure frozen inside a specific chapter of history. This is Retrovidia, where we don't chase shock or spectacle. We slow down, look closer, and remember why certain faces, moments, and eras refuse to fade. For more stories like this, told slowly, honestly, and without spectacle, subscribe to Retrovidia.